Okay. Phil, thank you for that. And joining us right now to continue this conversation is Seth Kaplan at Kaplan Research. Seth, you've looked at all of the flight data. I'm talking about the situation in Iran right now and all of the conjecture, speculation, and otherwise. How do you read it?
Yeah, I mean, you can construct, devil's advocate scenarios where something could have happened, and everything Phil said is true. So, for example, the fact that the pilots didn't put out a distress call. I mean, look, in the cockpit, the rule is aviate, navigate, communicate in that order. So in other words, if something goes so wrong that a pilot has to decide between trying to fix the problem and trying to communicate to controllers what's going on, the pilot's going to choose trying to fix the problem. That said, the Iranians have come out and said this morning that witnesses seem to see the plane turn back, perhaps witnesses from the ground. This would be, perhaps because of some technical problem. Pretty difficult to understand how the pilots could have that much control of the plane and yet again just disappear in terms of communication. All of this obviously happening there in the context of everything going on in the world. Look, in the past there have been crashes that have seemed to be suspicious. There was American Airlines 587 just a couple months after 9/11, and we all thought terrorism, and then it wasn't. But again, this is all devil's advocate, highly suspicious.
But in terms of your read as an analyst, as a member of the investment community that's looking at these things, do you write this off? Should this be part of any type of calculation as an investor in this business?
Right. So the outcome of the investigation obviously isn't going to bring back those 176 people. But in terms of the implications on Boeing, on the engine maker CFM, partly owned by GE, on airlines around the world, obviously a big difference between whether this was terrorism, or human error or something else, and whether it was something mechanical with the plane. And the more we see here and the more we think this through, you have to believe that the starting point here is that this is a one-off of some kind. I mean, there have been irresponsible statements coming from all the parties here, including the Ukrainians said these pilots are so experienced this couldn't possibly be pilot error. I don't know how you could say that, but yeah, the starting point here is that something very strange happened. Why this plane would be targeted, or whether it was something supposed to target something else, who knows? Hard to imagine why you would target this plane and these people, but very suspicious.
Hey, Phil, you want to jump in?
I would just echo what Seth's saying, and I'm telling you, usually when these accidents happen, Andrew, when you talk with the experts, they sit there and they say, this is kind of interesting. I would like to see this piece of data. It was within a couple of hours yesterday that almost everybody that I've talked with had said the same thing. They said, I'm sorry, there's no way that this adds up. Now, nobody wanted to come out and explicitly say, look, is it possible that there was an anti-aircraft missile that hit this plane because of the heightened tensions in Iraq? Nobody wanted to come out and explicitly say that, but they all danced around it, and they all said, I'd like to know. And so far, we know that NBC has reached out to the reporters who cover the Pentagon. They have reached out, and so far, officially, the U.S. says there's no indication that there was anti-aircraft missile fire that might have brought down this plane. But again, I'm just going back to what everybody says as they're looking at all the data. None of this adds up.
And then finally, Seth, Phil alluded to it earlier, the 737 MAX, in terms of the timeline. You have any new thoughts on what's to be believed here?
Well, the big news this week was something that Phil reported a couple of days ago and other media outlets, the fact that Boeing now seems to say, yeah, you need simulator time rather, for a pilot to transition from VNG that we've been talking about here to the MAX, which is essentially the third generation of the 737. That's a big deal because Boeing was doing anything possible to avoid that. That was a major selling point of this plane. Sort of this two-pronged approach. Hey, revolutionary economics, lots of fuel savings and all the rest of it, but just drop it into your fleet. Pilots can transition seamlessly between a plane like the 800 and a MAX 8 or a 7 or a 9. And now Boeing itself conceding that that's probably not likely.
Right.
That's a long-term issue for Boeing because the plane is just a little less valuable there compared to the Airbus competing product, which was again a selling point to the plane. So airlines are going to be taking that into account when they calculate what this plane is worth to them.
Seth, thank you. Phil, always good to see you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.